Hello, and welcome to What Would Jane Do, which is a podcast that takes a light-hearted look at Jane Austen's perspective on our contemporary world, often starting off back in hers and connecting it to today's affairs. And you have here your normal podcast hosts. That's Kate McFarlane. For those of you who are watching in YouTube Technicolor, you'll see her beautiful dress. And Kate,
it's purple this week, folks.
Purple. Kate is a reenactor and expert on Regency fashions and other affairs. And my name is Julia Golding. I'm an author and Jane Austen enthusiast. But what we should be giving the real drum roll to is the fact that we've got a very special guest with us today. We have Vanessa Kelly, who is best-selling author of a series that started with Murder at
Highbury.
Highbury.
Yeah. Highbury, yeah.
What we're talking about today is the second in the series, Murder at Donwell Abbey. For those of you who know your Emma, which is probably all of you, you are aware that Donwell Abbey is the house of Mr. Knightley. So before we get into discussion of the and the bigger theme of Jane Austen and detective fiction, let's say hello to Vanessa and find out what exactly has brought her to the point where she wants to write a book about one of Jane Austen's most famous characters. So Vanessa, tell us how you fell in love with Jane Austen and her world.
Well, first of all, thank you both for having me on. It's really fun to be here. And I just love this topic, the whole issue of mystery in Austen and of course in Emma. And I have to be honest right off the bat that the series, the idea for the series was not my idea. So credit where credit is due to my editor at Kensington. And I was at a bit of a crossroads because I previously wrote historical romance with a big mystery element. And I was kind of starting to cross streams and realizing that I love the romantic element, but I enjoyed writing about mystery more than I did the romance. So I approached my editor and said I'd like to do historical mystery staying in the Regency period. And he just kind of tossed it off. He said, yeah, what about a mystery series with Emma as the detective after she gets married? Fireworks just went off in my brain. And he hadn't read Emma for years. I don't even know where he pulled it out. But he did. And I hadn't, as soon as I heard it, as I said, fireworks went off in my brain. Emma is my favorite Austen novel and quite possibly my favorite book. So it was the stars aligned, and I went off and wrote a proposal, just the first couple of chapters, and shot it off to him, and he loved it, and away we went. So that's how it started. And of course, then once I agreed to it and signed the contract, I realized I had to write the book, and that's when the panic really set in. So,
but I think of all Jane Austen's characters, Emma is a great one as a mystery solver. Simply
Absolutely.
Because she's so sure she's right most of the time, and she's very, nosy, for want of a better word, and interfering with other people.
Word.
So it's and with Mr. Knightley to kind of calm her down a bit, all the other characters involved, it's definite must read. Yes.
Oh, thank you. Well, and you're right, because when we talked about it, when my editor and I first talked about it, we both said, we all know there have been a number of mysteries with Austen characters serving as amateur sleuths, but we both thought, why hasn't anybody done Emma before? She is absolutely the character who would be most likely, because she is so nice. She is so nosy. She's top of the food chain in Highbury. So she's
a woman with some agency who can actually get around and have the means to investigate as well.
And she can kind of pressure people and manipulate them a bit. And very conveniently for a mystery novel, her husband happens to be the local magistrate, which also comes in handy. So it really just seemed like the perfect idea at the perfect time. And we just ran with it. And once I calmed down and realized that I wasn't the first person writing something like this, and that it wasn't all on my shoulders, and got over myself, then I had a lot of fun writing it. So
good. I had a lot of fun as a reader, because
great.
as soon as I looked at the book, it was almost 400 pages. And you could just see some Regency publisher rubbing his hands and say, that'll go into 3 volumes bound in Morocco leather. But it's actually quite rare to get a book with a subject you love that long. So I thought, excellent. The nights are drawing in. I've got a nice cozy murder mystery that's starring all my favorite characters. This'll keep me going through the long dark nights.
Excellent.
So just keeping the topic a little bit broader than the actual book for a moment, I was first aware of someone doing a detective treatment to Jane Austen with the P.D. James' Death Comes to Pemberley.
Mm-hmm.
And in that one, they're thrown into it by a sort of...
You don't want to give too much away, do you?
Right.
I suppose I don't feel that Lizzie is actually particularly wanting to be a sleuth.
No.
Whereas I think with Emma, I think she would get bored quite quickly being mistress of, anywhere. I think she
anywhere really, yes.
People's lives. So I think she has a bit more petrol in her engine to keep going on this.
Yeah.
But should we talk a little bit about the background, that's Jane Austen's background for the detective novel? Because just looking at it as a sort of literary genre, it didn't really start in that period. The first, if you look through the books, what they say are the first detective novels are things like Edgar Allan Poe, and Charles Dickens has a detective character. But I was thinking about this, and actually I thought, hang on a minute, what about Catherine Morland? Because though she's not called a sleuth, the actual plot of Northanger Abbey is a wrong-headed whodunit.
Exactly, yeah.
So,
very good idea.
We need to rewrite the detective fiction books.
She would. And I think, I was reading a couple of articles about the whole notion of mystery in Jane Austen and why her books lend themselves to this. And of course, I can't remember the academic's name, so forgive me, academic spirits.
People can Google it afterwards.
Yeah. She said that Jane Austen's books are mysteries without a body. They're murder mysteries without a body. And I thought that was very interesting. And so I kind of started looking more into that. And of course, when you start reading on that level, you become aware of the fact that there are so many secrets in Austen novels. Yeah. There are so many puzzles. And Emma herself, loved puzzles. But there are puzzles, there are secrets to come out. And of course, the biggest secret to come out is know thyself. So, and know the people who are around you, who's trustworthy, who's not. So her novels, I think, are really about discernment, and particularly discerning the human heart and reading evidence correctly. Like you think of Catherine Morland, she's another heroine who, she's much, I think in a way, she's certainly, I don't want to call Emma, Emma's not bad-hearted, but Catherine has such a good heart. Like Catherine has such a good heart. She would never gossip about anyone maliciously. I can't even think of her gossiping at any point, really, the way Emma does, but Catherine is also, even though she's on this, she's investigating, she's another one she initially is a very bad detective because she misreads the evidence. Yeah. And I think Austen was really concerned about that, how people read the evidence of people around them so you could discern and judge rightly.
Yeah, because a lot of the problems in the plots are people leaping to conclusions or taking a very small fact and making it into an absolute mountain. Exactly. And then totally ignoring other facts.
Right,
as well.
Right. And Catherine does that. She does it with the best of intentions. She sticks up for her friend, but then she gets this idea in her head about General Tilney, and she runs with it. So,
and do you think she actually is just in love with slightly scaring herself, like you do when you read a Gothic novel? She's wanting to live in the plot, like so many Jane Austen fans wants to visit Highbury.
Right. Well, she's had kind of such a quiet life, and it's exciting for her. She wants a little excitement and drama, and she's somebody who, like many of us when we're young, has been influenced by bad friends. So for her, the puzzle is not only what really happened at Northanger Abbey. It's again, it's know thyself. It's Catherine coming to learn how to judge herself correctly too. So
not what people say, but also look at their actions.
Right, what they do. It's again, it's reading the evidence correctly.
So fitting Jane Austen into an early form of detective fiction, she doesn't have at her fingertips a kind of CSI world. There isn't a formal police force. The only existing police force at this time is the River Police, which was that's over in London. That's miles away. What there is in London are the Bow Street Runners, who are available to be hired occasionally, but they're not a proper detective agency.
There's no real forensic science at the time, is there?
No, fingerprints were invented or discovered much later in fact, it's part of the Indian Empire stuff, the Raj. That's when that comes about. A totally different story. But what we do have, though, of course, we've got a judicial system. So there are the military, which I'll let Kate talk about in a second. It has its own structure. The church has its own structure for punishment of wrongdoing. And then you've got magistrates, who are the local gentlemen who will sort of be the representative of the law on a local level. And if they want any heavies to come and do the work, they basically have to get local people along. In your book, you've got the constable, which is like a parish.
He's the parish constable.
It's not the same as a police constable for listeners who know the sort of Bobby on the beat, but it is somebody with an authority within the area, but not a policeman in the same way. And then the magistrates connect to the local prison system and the local judicial system. So, Kate, what happened in the army? Because as you enactment in the army, presumably very brutal discipline.
It was, but then life was pretty brutal everywhere, including as a civilian. So army, obviously, just as today, you absolutely don't want people acting individually and running off and doing their own things. So you have to be quite strict about discipline. And yes, there's this general idea of, the army, as Wellington famously said, was the scum of the earth. Although they weren't conscripted, they were volunteers. But, they did certainly get people who were pretty desperate to join the army in terms of, I don't want to starve on the street, so I'll join the army and get 3 square meals a day and get some pay. But women who were part of the army, not fighting, but there to do the laundry, for example, were allowed to be on the strength, as it was known. And you were subject to exactly the same discipline as the men. If you got out of line, if you got drunk, if you caused trouble, you would be flogged. Lots of regiments were flogging regiments. Obviously, there were degrees of punishment, so you wouldn't just go straight to flogging necessarily. But the retaliation for anybody stepping out of line had to be very sharp and swift, simply because if chaos erupted, and especially if you're in wartime, the last thing you possibly need is your men rebelling. There should be absolutely no question. If things go wrong, you will get punished. And the same, really, if you think about the time of Jane Austen and the World War going on, people in Britain were, going through some tough times themselves with land enclosures and Corn Laws and all sorts of things. And there was a very real sense, certainly among the upper classes, that it could all just be a powder keg and go off if discipline wasn't maintained, as you probably know. So I think people stealing anything, we think nowadays of just getting a slap on the wrist and maybe a delayed sentence. You could get thrown in prison. You could even get hung in Halifax for stealing a piece of cloth, simply because you were stealing someone's livelihood. You have just made a family starve. because there is no more cloth. There is no means of buying more cloth if they can't sell it at market. So punishment was severe right across the board.
So that is one place where we know where Jane Austen interacted with the judicial system, which was her aunt was accused of stealing some cloth, some lace, I think it was.
Lace, yes.
Yeah.
But again, hundreds of hours of work goes into lace, so you're stealing somebody's livelihood.
Right.
But Jane's parents did offer that she and Cassandra could go and keep their aunt company whilst waiting for her trial, which I don't think went down very well with Jane Austen.
No, I don't think they were too enthused about it. I think we covered some of the letters mentioning how it was not their favourite thing to contemplate.
I can imagine.
So we're trying to sort of sketch this world where different groups of people fell under different forms of authority. So whereas you could imagine in the world of Pride and Prejudice, the militia are under military discipline, in Emma's world, that it seems a much more unitary world of the village. There is the church and its own system, but most of everybody else is under the magistrate and then the local. You mentioned the coroner and other things. So, do you want to tell us a little bit about how you see the sort of law and order, CSI, Highbury, Vanessa?
I had known a bit about the law in Regency England, but I had to get much more familiar with it to write the books. And it was, as I'm sure you both know, it's really a bit of a dog's breakfast during that era, depending on where you live. For one thing, if you lived in a city, particularly if it was London, there was more structure. I mean, there was always some structure in terms of how a murder investigation should be conducted. There were laws about that, and there's the assize courts. But the further you got away from the center of power, kind of the loosey-goosier it got, for lack of a better term. As you said, you had the magistrate, but any village or town could have either a parish bailiff or a constable or a sheriff. So I had to decide how I was going to order Highbury for the purposes of my novel. And one of the things I came across was the absolutely critical role of the coroner. I mean, the coroner, I think, has a lot more power. When nowadays we think of the coroner as the guy who just does or the woman who just does the forensic stuff. But it was the coroner who really drove a lot of the legal processes around violent crimes and particularly murder in the Regency era, and particularly in a place like Highbury. So one of the first problems I came across was discovering that there really weren't, it wasn't like every village had a coroner. There were not that many coroners, as you know, in England. And sometimes it took several days. If somebody thought murder was in play, a suspicious death, depending on where the closest coroner was, it could take 2 or 3 or 4 days for the coroner to get to the village. And again, as you mentioned, Julie, it was the magistrate in most cases who made these decisions. So if there was a suspicious death, often it would be up to the magistrate to determine that, to send for the coroner, and to start the process that would lead to the coroner investigating, and then the coroner deciding there was enough evidence to call the coroner's inquest, which would be a jury of 12 men who would review the evidence and then decide if murder had been done. And that was all, of course, that they would decide. They would simply decide that murder had been done. And then, as you can see in Murder in Highbury, my book, then the magistrate and the coroner authorized the constable to investigate, to try and determine who committed murder and how it was done. And then once that person was arrested, if they were arrested, they would then go to trial later on at one of the assize courts. London, of course, had a completely different system. But, the great thing for me was because it was loose enough, I could insert an amateur investigator into the novel because there wasn't, aside from the coroner and the coroner's inquest, in a lot of the little villages, there wasn't that precise a structure that anyone was following. I mean, I read a lot of really interesting stories about how it would take 3 or 4 days for a coroner to arrive in a particular case, and in that time, the body would be robbed or people would steal from the person who'd been murdered. I mean, it could be pretty chaotic. There was nobody cordoning off the crime scene and putting up crime tape and that type of thing. So for a writer like me, who is especially working in a village setting, I was able to really kind of slide around or just insert Emmett into the investigation in an informal way without, I think, actually violating a whole lot of verisimilitude, for lack of a better word. There just was. Yeah, sorry.
Oh, sorry, ahead, I was going to say, Vanessa, you've got the interesting pull, haven't you, between the lower class copper,
yeah,
who I'm pleased to say is not very bright and definitely prejudicial. Because if he was very bright, there'd be no need for Emma.
That's right. That's right. Exactly right.
By necessity, not a very nice person.
Right.
But you've also got the natural deference people would feel and definitely show still today to people of higher class. So you've got that sort of a policeman a bit resentful probably of people not deferring to him and not really deferring to the law by extension, and the magistrate and Emma indeed can override certain things. So that's quite an interesting dynamic as well, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And the one point I would make too, and then I'll cede to you, Julia, is that of course the parish constable wasn't his full-time job. These poor guys were kind of dragooned into these positions for very little money, usually by the parish or by the magistrate. And in his case, my constable is a farmer. So they almost always had another job. And they didn't have any experience or training.
No, that's a very good point.
They had virtually no training in how to investigate something like
hopefully
a murder.
They wouldn't want to encounter a murder.
No, they would. And I'm sure there were many cases where a blind eye was turned to something that was pretty suspicious, and everybody just let's move on and get on with life.
Especially if they determined that justice had been served in a very non-law-abiding way, but they thought, well, it's whoever's gone after somebody else, they deserved it.
Right.
I want to sort of point out one thing which might surprise people listening to this, which is, yes, it takes a while to get a coroner to a village. But on the other hand, once things get going, it moves with really, really surprising swiftness. So the book that I'm publishing, which is in real world Jane Austen as opposed to a fictional world, the Austen Intrigue, it's based on a real murder that happened in the Jane Austen circle, where 2 friends of her brother and sister-in-law were brutally murdered. And there are real papers. You can go and look at what happens. And the surprising thing is the coroner holds the session the next day, delivers his verdict the same day. We're obviously but basically the jury is told, it all happens like,
here's the murder weapon.
This is what happened, everybody. They did take statements from people, but they did know who actually killed the person because there was witnesses, or at least one of the people. And it was held in the pub next door to the house where the event happened. So it's all very local. There wasn't a murderer to hang in that case. Though in my novel, I do point out they closed that case too quickly because it was much more going on. But if you look at something else I've written about, which is the murder of Spencer Perceval, the Prime Minister who was assassinated in the House of Commons, he was murdered and there was a trial of the person who assassinated him the following week, and he was hung the week after.
Wow.
So, you imagine people sitting on death row for years and years and years.
No.
It was done and dusted. If people just thought that justice delayed was not justice.
Right.
So there is this scary acceleration that can happen, which is good for us writers.
Right.
When you get something accelerating, like
you have the ticking clock in the background.
Just to say for your next plot for Emma, that it can accelerate really scary. So writing in Jane Austen's fictional world, tell us about your thoughts about taking her characters on journeys that she hasn't imagined. Particularly for the thing I really enjoyed most of everything in your novel was Miss Bates.
I love Miss Bates.
Thank you.
I thought that was great.
But she's the sort of weird Watson to Jane's Sherlock. Tell us
I
about
really loved
that.
I loved seeing her character just do a bit more, basically, other than just being this silly, rather twitty woman who was obviously there as a comedic effect. So it's absolutely really great to see her have some agency, and I love that.
Thank you. Well, I wanted, one of the things I've always loved about Austen's novels are the secondary characters. I mean, we love nobody can do a secondary character like she can in like 2 sentences. All we have to do is think of Mrs. Elton, and it's like, oh, she just cracks on, and you know exactly who this person is. So one of the things I did want to do was flesh out the secondary characters a bit more, and I agree with you that I loved Miss Bates. I've always loved Miss Bates, and she surprised me, though, by becoming Emma's sidekick in Murder at Donwell Abbey. I didn't quite anticipate that, but, the character who was her sidekick in the first book wasn't really available to be. I think, for my purposes anyway, or, in traditional detective fiction, you have to have somebody that the protagonist is playing off, bouncing ideas off.
Explaining things too.
Yes. I mean, you don't want too many, well, Bob,
no,
the reason I did this was because... and it obviously couldn't be Mr. Knightley all the time, because he doesn't want her running off and doing this sort of thing. So I wanted to develop the secondary characters and give them a bit more of their own life. And you're right. There's Highbury is a very small world. So I had to find ways to expand Emma's world within Highbury, within this role. And that did involve bringing in more secondary characters who could have their own development and their own impacts and influences on the story. Because you can't, and this is, obviously in Murder in Donwell Abbey, it still takes place in Highbury. It's still Emma's world. But, the whole issue you raised, Julia, of the Murder, She Wrote setting. I mean, how many murders can happen in this village?
One of my questions I sent Vanessa in advance was the kind of what next for Emma, because there's a program here called Midsummer Murder, which is set, which is like Murder, She Wrote. It's set in a village in the area I live in. And you just have to take it as read that these villages have got a higher murder rate than
it's like
some
Father Brown, right?
Yeah.
It's got a higher murder rate than some inner city in some South America.
Right.
My husband swears that Miss Marple is actually a serial killer, because the amount of death that happens around her, why isn't anyone asking any questions?
So I suppose let's deal with that now. You've done Murder in Highbury, Murder in Donwell Abbey. Are you able just to say, okay, everyone's going to accept that Emma's way is littered with bodies?
Is Emma going to the seaside next?
Well, she's actually going to Yorkshire next. She's going to Enscombe.
Well, Vanessa, you've got to come visit me, because I'm in Yorkshire.
Oh, I will absolutely do that. Thank you.
Taking you around.
That would be wonderful. I would love that. Thank you, Kate. Yes, she has to go farther afield, but even within Donwell, what I tried to do is bring in a larger plot. I mean, the plot in the first book is pretty tight. And in the second book, I tried to bring in a larger plot, more of the outside world, as it were, kind of like more chaos, more anarchy, more crime coming from the outside.
Yeah, that was very interesting. I'm not
into-
going to give anything away, but it was
Yeah.
very interesting
Yeah.
doing how
Yeah.
you did that.
I had to come up with something. And Julia, in your book, in your wonderful book, I mean, you have this whole, backdrop of the city to draw on, which I
Yeah.
think you just did beautifully. I mean, for a murder works because you have a stable environment and then there's some element of instability or anarchy that is introduced, and then the protagonist has to restore order. And I think it is more difficult. I mean, it's easy to take a little town like Highbury and fluff it up. I mean, the poultry thief does that. Everybody loses their mind over the poultry thief, but it is a challenge coming up with murders every 6 to 9 months or whatever. Whereas in the city, I mean, and what I loved about your novel too, Julia, the Austen Intrigue, was how you were able to move through so many layers of society and so many different settings and social structures, from the theater to high society. And you had settings like Vauxhall Gardens, and I really loved that. And so the challenge for me is going to be able to find more settings that are realistic for Emma.
Boy,
Yeah,
have we
I
got
suppose-
settings in Yorkshire. Just you wait.
Yeah, I bet.
Thanks for
It's a hotbed.
Yeah.
I'm
I
going to
think
pick
one
it
of
up.
the things to say about that, just as a sort of on the craft level,
Yeah.
is that I've got the detective duo. I call them private inquiry agents because the word detective wasn't really used properly there. So they are natural magnets bringing in. So that they've had a case that took them to the Lake District in the previous book. And the very first case was also in the Lake District, but it also happened in the Hellfire Caves near High
Yeah, that was
Wycombe.
lots of fun.
So they are attracting the crime to them.
Mm-hmm.
I guess one thing that's possible for your Emma is if she gets interested in this, it's natural for her to have her gossip antennae alert.
Right.
If she goes somewhere else to visit, and people do get killed all the time, she can insert herself, because she's that kind of protagonist, into it, and she has a social status where she can probably waft up and get an interview with somebody. So I think that it's not an insolvable problem, particularly if you're happy to move out of Highbury, because poor old Highbury.
I mean, how many people can we kill off? Or how many villagers can become innocent suspects? Because it's not fair after a while. You're right.
That does make me laugh in these long-running detective series. Something like, I don't know if you follow the J.D. Robb series.
Oh,
yes.
Yeah. Which is on book 60 or something.
Oh my gosh, yes.
But almost everybody in the detectives world is either been accused of murder, close friend has been murdered.
Everyone's a suspect.
Exactly.
Yeah. And you just think, every time a new person comes into the circle, you think, oh, maybe in next book you're going to be, I don't know.
What's going to happen?
I'm the murderer.
Yeah.
The protagonist is the murderer. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't think you'll be doing 60 books. I'm sure. Well, maybe you will, but
I'd have to start writing a lot faster at my age. So, but along those lines, I was thinking, because you want to always be, as you know, be thinking 2 or 3 books ahead. And I was thinking Bath would be a fun place to go because there's more activity there, and
lots of new characters.
And Austen loved it, and maybe the Tilneys could come into.
I'm just going to say, could you not
cross-fertilize?
I am crossing streams actually in the 3rd book, which I am writing now, Murder at Enscombe. And I wasn't anticipating this, but Miss Bingley and the Hursts show up. So that was a lot of fun. That's fun to work with. So yeah, I mean, I think while still being respectful of the characters, we can have a little fun with them too.
Oh, right? Yeah. And it is fun because You've got these ready-made, wonderful characters.
Yeah.
Of course you want to play with them. It's
Yeah.
like having a doll's house, isn't it?
Yes, exactly.
I think there's also, because you're selling your book largely, I mean, primarily to Jane. I think there is a danger when you take the P.D. James route, where you wrench a character away from what we all think they are. And the character she did that with is Colonel Fitzwilliam, who becomes, in her version, quite a martinet and quite unpleasant, really.
Yeah, I didn't really like that, because I liked Colonel Fitzwilliam in the obviously in the Jane Austen.
Oh, he's a good
novels.
guy, yeah.
Yeah, well, you'd think so.
She's obviously totally allowed to do that, but
Yeah.
to reassure people who are coming to your books, you haven't done that with Miss Bates, or
No.
everyone is essentially
As they
recognizable.
I want them to be recognizable, and you can do fun things where you push them a little further along the path, as you mentioned, Kate, with Miss Bates. I mean, she's, people in an offhand way would say, oh, she's the town gossip. But what does that mean? It means that people trust her enough to share secrets with her, because she is, in fact, a good-hearted person.
Yeah, they like her.
Yeah,
they don't sort of run away like Emma does all the time.
Right. She's genuine, yeah. And, and Emma has to, of course, get over and that was fun playing with that dynamic.
Yeah, very much.
That she has to get over that. But people go to Miss Bates and visit Miss Bates and tell her things for a reason. So you can play with those elements.
Or they equally, some people might be very dismissive of
That's
her.
right.
And she can observe and,
exactly
come to conclusions. So it works both ways, which is great.
It does. Yeah. So yeah, you can do a lot of fun things with the characters.
How do you go about constructing your plot? Because obviously a murder mystery is different from the romances you may have done previously.
Yeah.
Don't be too exhaustive about it, because that's most of the work you do. But what have you noticed about shifting from a romantic pulse to this mystery one?
Well, I do have to pay a lot more attention, obviously, to the plot. And, when you're writing a romance, which I'm not for a moment suggesting it was easy to write a romance, because you have to pay more attention to the emotional lives of, the characters, the primary characters. But, I could... as a friend of mine once said, in a romance, what you really want to see are the hero and heroine and how they overcome obstacles and get together. The plot is secondary in a lot of respects. And the plot is a character in a mystery, I think. A mystery has to be airtight. I mean, so I had to spend a lot more time. I am a plotter. So I spent about a month pre-writing before I even start writing the book. I construct a plot, and I'm very old school. I outline, I use note cards. I try to build it scene by scene by scene, which, as I'm sure changes as you go along. But I do try to construct the plot and figure out the different turning points of the mystery before I actually start sitting down and writing the novel. Because if I don't have it figured out, I'm not one of those people who can just go off into the mist. I would have a panic attack, and, my husband would have to take me to the doctor. So and my editor also demands a substantial outline. So I have to write an outline before I start, which is very helpful for me, because then I can say, oh, that doesn't make any sense. Anybody who reads the most basic mystery is going to figure out that this is a big plot hole here. So
they will tell you.
And they will tell you when they do.
Thanks to social media.
Yes, they will. So I do plot it all out, and it took me longer, and it's a little scarier in that respect, I will say. And but fortunately, that's what we have editors for too. And in fact, when I gave him the synopsis for book 3, he said, "Here, there's a hole here. You have to fix it." I guess
Jane Austen had people read Pride and Prejudice when she'd first written it. So do you have I imagine you have not just proofreaders, but people to read it and just maybe give you some feedback?
Yes, I do. Actually, my beta reader who also does a lot of my little copy editing for me, which isn't a little job, as you know, is my husband. He's my first reader, and my husband's a writer. We actually wrote books together several years ago.
Oh,
We
that's
wrote
good.
some suspense novels, and he was a writer by profession too. So he reads everything, and he's a huge mystery and thriller reader as well, much more so than I am. So he's just like, nah, this isn't working. I mean, he's just brutally honest too.
Yeah,
which
that's
is what
you need. Absolutely.
It's what you need. So I'm fortunate in that respect. But it's been trickier for me. It's definitely been a transition to go.
But it's good, isn't it, to stretch yourself a
bit.
It
is. I was getting bored.
You were getting stale. That's no good for you both.
Yeah. I was getting a bit bored.
I take a slightly different approach to you, and I do tend to work it out as I go along.
Lucky. I'm so jealous.
But I don't know. I mean, partly this last one I've written is because it's based on a real crime. The other crimes in the previous 3 novels in the series have been ones I've made up to illustrate something about the era. That I thought of the crime because I wanted to say something about romanticism, for example.
Yeah, yeah.
It kind of fitted a flavour. This one, because I found it in the sort of footnote of a Jane Austen biography and thought, what the blazes?
Yeah,
why has nobody looked at this story before?
I know, that's why I'm so excited to read it.
It's wild.
Yeah.
And I do have a sort of doctorate in the period, so I know how to do the research and how to sort of look behind what's going on. That I actually found I was doing a bit like a true crime podcast. Saying, well, hang on a minute, that doesn't make sense. And so I was sort of researching it in a way which was much more like historical research.
Right.
It's less plot, more finding out what the history was. For example, reading the newspapers and finding out the sort of the minutiae of the politics at the time, which I don't normally do, but it sort of opened up a whole set of other possible suspects for me. It was great fun because in a way I was having to be a detective for this particular plot.
Right. Well, and you did a marvelous job with it, because I was amazed at how many, I was really impressed with how many balls you kept up in the air. I mean, it's a great plot, and it's a big plot because, as you say, it involves politics.
Yeah.
And it's a real historical event.
My editor gave it to her sort of newly arrived member of staff and said, read this to see if you understand it. Because if you know a period, you will assume things like they will know who Napoleon is. Or,
yeah, exactly.
But a young reader, a young junior editor who's 25 might not. So that was very helpful. So it has got a little bit of context, more context than perhaps, because to get the plot, you need to get.
You do. And I love that.
The changing sides. It's a very, it's like the changing sides in the Second World War. You have to know which year you're in to understand people's motives. But other parts of it, I don't know if you do this, other parts were inspired by things I just happened to see whilst writing. So I went to the Bodleian Library for a talk given by, it was actually about Tolkien. But whilst I was waiting to go in...
My other favorite author.
Whilst I was waiting to go in, had a display case of these 18th century, 19th century transparencies, which were a form of... picture that they used as a sort of special effect. They used it on stage, and so I thought, oh, that's an interesting. So that's a theme that I wove in, and that just really wouldn't have been in my head unless I'd been standing waiting for a talk to start. So I think there's this lovely sort of happenstance you do as a as well as the more focused. Here's my research of my notebooks.
And I think that's absolutely true, because for Donwell, I stumbled across. It's not really giving too much of the plot away to say that there's a bit of a smuggling subplot in it. And I hadn't initially anticipated including that, but I stumbled across some lovely pictures of the old Roman roads that have gone, back to the wild, although some of them have now been turned into hiking trails, as I'm sure you know. And And so I just came across these pictures of these lovely old ruined Roman roads that ran up from the coast that I'd written books about smuggling that had a smuggling subplot before, but they were always on the coast. And so I just, as you say, by happenstance, just stumbled across these pictures and then got interested in this history of how they would run the goods up from the coast to the cities along these ancient Roman roads. And obviously a lot of the smugglers were not as romantic as people like to make them out to be. We know that, but there was a sense of romance to it and this kind of thrilling, adventurous element that I thought
and the typical society thing of putting one over on the man.
Right, of course. Because exactly.
Why am I paying these ridiculous taxes?
That's right.
Why should I suffer?
That's right. Why can't I have my brandy and my lace?
Yeah.
And so you're right. I just that was not originally part of it, but it's such a fascinating part of history. And so it's fun when you come across something like that and can incorporate it into your book. And it makes the book bigger and richer too.
Yeah, it does.
So that's just to reiterate that Murder at Donwell Abbey is out. Have we got a pub date for this?
It's the 25th of this month.
Yeah,
25th of November. Yeah.
Just in time for Christmas, folks.
That gives you 3 days to read that, and then you can get my one, which is the Austen Intrigue.
Which is also a wonderful book. That's right. Get them together. It's a perfect Christmas present.
This is my Christmas present to yourself, folks. Both of these books.
That's right.
And apparently it's dedicated to me, so I've got to buy it now.
Yes. I might actually give you a copy, Kate,
I want to support my writers.
But just moving on from the world of our books, we are in the 250th anniversary year of Jane Austen. So I just wanted to ask you, Vanessa, as we sort of sign off, is there anything particularly that you've enjoyed about this year or are looking forward to as we get closer to the anniversary?
Oh, I've been disappointed, not in any of the anniversary celebrations. I've been disappointed that there's been nothing in Ottawa. And, shame on me. No, nothing. And shame on me for not doing anything either.
Yes, be the change you want to see.
Yes, that's exactly right. So
it's not too late to have a tea party,
and I will. I think you're right. I must. And
maybe launch your book with a tea party and a bowl.
Yeah, we are actually. There's a book launch at a lovely local bookstore, and wine will be involved and treats and that kind of thing. So I am enjoying. I think one of the things I'm really enjoying are all the lovely editions that are coming out of Austen's work, and I'm sneaking off to bookstores and buying as many of them as possible, and trying to tell myself it's all for work.
Of course it is.
Yes. So that's and the memorabilia, and it's just been fun seeing how bookstores are setting up various displays around that, and just generally seeing more interest in
which is great,
Jane, as there should be.
I know, because it always amuses me when we do the Jane Austen Festival in Bath that so many people stop us in the street when we're walking around dressed up as we do and say, "Oh, what's going on?" And I said, "This happens every year. It's happened every year for about 10 years now. How do you not know?" And for once, they actually had banners in the streets, across the streets. You could not miss the fact that the Jane Austen Festival was on. Thank goodness.
That's right. So it's wonderful to see that there is more interest, and I have to be the change too. You're right.
So, Kate, is there anything that is still coming up that you want to tell people about?
Well, funny you should mention that, Julia, because Bankfield Museum, that I'm totally not affiliated with, they've got a 5 shillings a yard talk going on, clues to fashion in the works of Jane Austen and the Brontes. Sorry about that. £12 a ticket. Go to Bankfield Museum. It's Tuesday, the 16th of December, and ticket source. And it's a talk from 1 until 2:30 with our head of collections, Rachel Terry. And it's not too late to go and see Mr. Darcy's shirt and indeed all the rest of his outfit. And my favourite, lovely curry-coloured Spencer that Elizabeth Bennet wears, and Emma's yellow pelisse and outfit. So loads of beautiful costumes for free until 20th December at Bangfield Museum. Come and see it, because they will be put back into storage and some of them given back to Cosprop. And there's so many amazing National Trust properties with lots of Jane Austen memorabilia and costumes all over the country at the moment. I went to Stourhead House. Loads of people go to Stourhead Gardens, but you forget there's an actual house there as well. And there is. And they've got some of the Keira Knightley costumes as well. So it's all over the country.
Fun.
If you just go to a big house, you'll probably see something Austen-esque that they've all jumped on the bandwagon and done something.
That's great. That's great.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing yet more Jane Austen dramatizations that are coming up.
Yeah.
We obviously had Miss Austen. I mean, these are adjacent because that's
Yes.
that's a novel about Cassandra, obviously. But there are more in the works, and I've been enjoying my best friend in the world is the financial controller on the new Netflix.
Oh yes,
Pride
yes.
Prejudice, and she's not allowed to tell me anything.
Can she
But
hint
she's
though?
Shocking.
But I know her well enough to sort of, find out where she is. So when she tells me where she is on various places, I then sort of sit and try and work out what's
are they gonna
happening.
do
And she did tell me the other day, we were all in a flap because one of the cast members' wife has just had a baby, but she couldn't tell
right.
who.
No.
And I discovered from Graham Norton, who's a chat show host here, that it was actually Mr. Darcy himself.
Oh,
He and Saoirse Ronan have had a little baby. So I thought, well done, Lucy, for not telling me. But I now know what that was about.
So when he's looking pained and haggard,
yes,
certain points in the filming, that'd be why.
He's a new dad.
I assume it's him anyway, because that's obviously a famous pairing.
Yes.
Anyway, so I'm looking forward to seeing all of those coming through very soon and next year.
Yes,
we need more Jane on TV. And
always.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Vanessa, for talking.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Do let us know when you do your Scarborough one, because it sounds as though is it Scarborough? Did you say? Yorkshire. Where are you going next? Yorkshire.
It's Yorkshire and near York, actually.
Oh, near York.
Where I've decided to put Enscombe Park, as I'm calling it, because I spent several days trying to. Is it Enscombe Manor? Is it the park? Like, what is it? They never say.
Yes.
Can I highly recommend Revo Abbey as a location if you're going up?
Yeah.
I was there last week. On my way up.
Nostell Priory is good as well.
Yeah, it's just the most gorgeous.
Yeah, Revo Abbey is just gorgeous.
Gorgeous.
Sounds like I need to do more research.
You so need to come and visit.
Yes, I will. Thank you for the invitation. I'd love to do that.
And
thank you for this. This was really fun.
No, it was great.
We look forward to seeing the book shooting up the bestseller chart.
Absolutely. Both of yours.
Both of us. That's right.
I'm going to buy two now.
That's right. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Vanessa.
Okay. Bye. Bye.